Okay, so let's start chapter 20. By 1850, there's more than 23 million people living in the United States, and most of them are living in farms and towns and small little villages. But as time goes on, that's going to change. People are going to start leaving the villages, leaving the farms, and they're going to move towards the cities. 3.5 million, 3.5 million, 15% of American people lived in the cities back in the day. 50 years later, that's jumped up to 40%. So people are coming to the cities for all kinds of different reasons. The cities were exciting. They had different things to do. You weren't stuck on the farm, watching grass grow. They had different places you could go for entertainment. And one of the main reasons people were going to the cities is because there was opportunities for jobs there. With all these new factories opening up, it gave people an opportunity to work and make money in a way other than on a farm. The factories were usually built near railroads or near a river so they could ship out their products more easily. Most cities specialize in one or two industries. So if you think about Youngstown and Pittsburgh, both of those specialize in steel. Cleveland, Ohio specialized in oil processing and oil refining. So specialize means to be good at one or two things. The railroads were very important during this time. There's still no cars. There's no, vans. There's no planes. None of that yet. So railroads are the main way that products get shipped. So all of these new workers were getting jobs in factories, and factories were relatively new, and they would hire thousands of workers sometimes. And these factories, instead of making one or two of an item, they would make things in huge quantities, which is called mass production. And when a factory makes more of something, the price per unit goes down, so they can charge less and make more profit off of it. So every time a new factory opens up, that means more jobs for the people. But the competition for these jobs is pretty high. Since people were desperate for work, the bosses or the employers didn't have to pay them a lot of money. Most of these employees working at the factories were working 60 hours a week. That's 10 hours a day for 6 days. And they're earning a paycheck that's $10 or less. So they only get one day off and they're bringing home $10 at the end of the week, working really hard. Now, a lot of you guys would be like, you would just quit. And the boss didn't care because there's someone right behind you who wants that job just as bad, if not more than you. These factories were also very dangerous. Today, if you get hurt at a factory while you're working, usually the factory is going to pay for the injury. They have insurance and stuff like that, and insurance didn't really exist yet. Most employers believed it was the workers' responsibility to protect themselves. So if you were working in one of these steel factories and the blast furnace boils over and spills burning hot steel on you and burns the skin off your arm, the factory owner would say, should have been more careful. So if you get an injury like that, you're probably getting fired, you're not going to be able to find another job, and you're not getting insurance money. You're getting none of that. So these workers were treated pretty poorly. And these factories also hired children to do a lot of work. They hired children where being small and having tiny hands would be to their advantage, If they're working on intricate machinery and, things where things could get stuck in tiny places. And a lot of these children were making a nickel a day. So the Statue of Liberty is something we all know. It's in New York City. It was a gift from France to the United States. And a lot of people don't realize the Statue of Liberty is made out of copper. So it used to be like the same color as a penny. But over time, the weather and conditions outside has made it change to the green that we know today. The Statue of Liberty was one of the first things immigrants would see on their way to America. When they're coming to New York to get checked in, that's what they would see waiting for them. When these immigrants would come to America, many of them would have to go through a place called Ellis Island, where they would be inspected to make sure they were healthy, and a lot of times their names would be changed or shortened to make them more easy for Americans to say. Getting to the United States was very difficult, was expensive. Usually a family would sell everything they had in their old country to get tickets on a boat, and they would buy tickets in the cheapest section called steerage. Steerage is at the bottom of the boat next to the engine room. It's hot, no windows, it's nasty down there, but they're willing to do it so they can get that trip to America and hopefully have a better life. Most of the immigrants before the 1880s came from England, Ireland, Germany, Sweden, and Norway. These people were known as the old immigrants. And it's not because they're old people, it's because their people have been in America longer. During the 1880s, more than 500,000 new immigrants came from Italy, Poland, and Greece. The immigrants came to America for many different reasons. Some of them were farmers and their farms were struggling in their home countries. Others came to escape religious persecution because the countries where they were from were treating them unfairly because of their religion, similar to how the Pilgrims and the Puritans came here. There was also something called the Homestead Act of 1862, and the Homestead Act advertised cheap land for sale, and it advertised in Europe. So these immigrants see these big billboards saying that land is cheap in America. Just come here, get what you need, and you could set up a life and start over. Unfortunately, those advertisements were not truly honest, and by the time many of those immigrants got here, all of that land was sold already. So that would be like you hear that the brand new iPhone is going on sale for $200. So you sell your phone and you take your trip down to the mall trying to get one, and when you get there, they're all sold out. All they have is old iPhone 6s, and you don't have a phone anymore. So now you got a tough choice. Are you going to buy that thing that you didn't really want just so you can have one, or are you going to go home empty-handed? And the immigrants had to make a similar decision with their homes. They could try to turn around and go back home, but they sold everything they had. So they have to start all over, and the cheap land they wanted is gone. So many of them end up moving towards the cities. Moving to the cities was challenging for the immigrants. A lot of them didn't speak English well. So the jobs they got were dangerous jobs. If you think about that clip we watched the other day about the guys building the skyscrapers, many of them were immigrants willing to take those dangerous jobs because they didn't have very many other options. A lot of them faced discrimination because of their nationality, because they were from another country. Immigrants from Asia settled on the West Coast by California, and a lot of them were denied jobs. But in the past, they had done much of the hard work building out these railroads that connected these other railroad systems, and we were kind of hypocrites. We let them come in, do the hard work, help us build the railroads, and then in 1882, Congress passed a law that said no more Chinese immigrants were allowed to come to America. They basically put a cap on it and said no more. The largest group of immigrants coming to America was from Italy. Most of those men were coming to America. They were hoping to make enough money so they could go back home to Italy and be better off and take care of their families. The next group of immigrants coming to America are the Jewish immigrants. And a lot of them were leaving their home countries because they were being persecuted or discriminated against because of their religion. Many Americans did not like the new immigrants. They were afraid of them. They were afraid they were going to take the jobs they wanted and work for less money. A lot of people were closed-minded, and they didn't like dealing with people who didn't speak English well. The ironic part is pretty much everybody in America, their family were immigrants at one time. So now we have American people discriminating against immigrants, which is what their families were too just 50 years ago. Immigrants were not the only people being discriminated against. The Civil Rights Act of 1875 made segregation in public places against the law. And segregation is when you split people based on race. But a couple of years later, in 1883, the Supreme Court said the Civil Rights Act was actually illegal. So the court said first, you can't separate people based on race. A couple of years later, the court said, yeah, I guess you can. So these laws called Jim Crow laws were passed. And Jim Crow laws separated places into white and black sections. So when you see these old pictures, it's going to show areas just for white people and areas just for black people. And those things were supposed to be separate but equal, meaning they're supposed to be the same quality, but that's never really the case. Almost every single time, the white people were getting better stuff than the black families. So, the only hope of ending the Jim Crow laws was the Supreme Court. The 14th Amendment got passed in 1868, and the 14th Amendment specifically said that the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, applies to African Americans as well as white citizens. The court agreed. They said, yeah, that's true, but only for government, not to individuals. So what that means is the government could not discriminate. But if there was a guy who owned the local corner store, he could discriminate against you. He could choose not to allow certain people in. So there's a famous court case related to this, called Plessy versus Ferguson. Louisiana passed a law in 1890 that required separate sections for white and black passengers. Homer Plessy decided to test this law in 1892. He sat in a train and he sat in the section that was only for white people. And he basically did it just to see if they were going to arrest him. What happened is they did. So he lost his case, he was found guilty, and he appealed the verdict. And an appeal was when you ask the court to take a second look at a case. He said the 14th Amendment guarantees equal rights to all people. The Supreme Court looks at his case and they disagree. They say, nope. They say having separate areas for white and black Americans is completely fine. This was bad because what it did is it gave people who were already being racist and discrimination, it basically was giving them permission to continue doing those racist and discriminatory actions. Okay guys, so now I need you to open up Google Classroom. You're going to go to chapter 20, lesson 1 and 2.